What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. Okay, today I'm going to talk about African slavery. Okay, I'm going to talk about African slavery, specifically slavery in Nigeria and Ghana and this West Coast. And I mean African slavery, Africans enslaving other Africans. Right? Because I was just talking to one of my homies here, okay? And I'm asking questions because, I really be wanting to learn about my history and my culture, right? Pre-European colonization. Because, you always hear people say, well, Africans enslave other Africans and everybody enslave everybody. But slavery is not, the same everywhere, right? And I really want to get down to the nuts and bolts of how slavery was practiced here, right? And so I ask questions, right? And that's the best thing you do is ask the people here, right? So because I'm a chief, I have access to pretty important people in the village. I have access to kings, princes, high chiefs, all kind of stuff. So I asked a princess and a prince that I know, personally here about slavery, because the higher you would think that the upper class would know, because it would probably be the upper class who would have slaves or whatnot, right? So a story that I heard about the family lineages, because it's all come from lineages, because in this village, everybody is related in some form of fact. Well, not everybody, because then it'd be incest. Like, they know they're related, right? But in villages, you got lineages that branch off, and people know who their relatives are, right? It'd be whole streets where they'd be like, okay, this father here had 3 wives, and each wife had 5 children, and they had each of those children had 4 wives, and those 4 wives had 6 children each, and they all know where each other are and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, it's deep and complicated, right? So a story that I've heard, is through the princess, is that, and when I say princess, not crown princess, because the reason why, I'm gonna be all over the place with this one, because this is some tasty history, cultural stuff right here, right? I want you guys to know that African royalty, the royal class, have not been broken. So despite the transatlantic slave trade, right, despite all of that, the African royal lineage, I'm talking about all the way back to the Ifa Empire. I'm talking about ain't all the way back, has not been broken. To this day, the same lineages still exist. They still operate. And they still practice. They're still there. The only difference is the Queen of England, okay, and all those other European kings and queens stole all their shit. So they're not rich like they used to be, right? Well, they're rich in land and resources, but they can't take it. Not all of them can take advantage of it. Some of the kings and the Obas here are rich, stupid, dumb rich. Some of the kings are not. They got different levels of kings. You got first class king, second class king, and third class king, and you got a few other kind of kings, right? I'm a chief of a first class king. First class king is the top of the top king, like he's the king of the kings, right? And then you have second class king. It's almost like federal, state, local, okay? Think of it like that. And the reason why none of the branches have broken is because in Africa, the way kingship is passed on is, if you had, well, in Nigeria specifically, in the Yoruba, I don't know, I'm pretty sure they do it differently in other places, maybe, but I'm pretty sure it's kind of similar, right? They have families. So when the king dies, right, there are designated first branches of the family that will start to campaign, right? Like if you were running for the governorship, right? So you'll have like maybe four or 5 designated first branch families that will put up their princes, right? And their princes will campaign to the high chiefs. They'll campaign to the villages, to the town, to the city that they rule, right? And there'll be a vote. And then they'll vote out of the princes, right, who are all related, which one will be the king, right? So that means anytime Europeans came and tried to decapitate the king, kill the king, kidnap the king, because of the system of kingship and the royal class here, there'll always be another replacement in that direct line for the kingship. So I know they be like, you got the British, everybody talks about the British and how they got, the Queen Elizabeth and how far it goes back, and you got the royal class in Japan and all that stuff. Well, Africa, ours go back further than all of them, and it's still in line. So our history, even though disturbed, is unbroken. All right, but let's get back to the slavery thing. How did it work? Okay, so here's the story. There was a warrior in this village, all right, that I'm living in now. Very popular warrior. And this is when the village, when this village was not so big. Then the king in my village is a third-class king, okay? In this particular part, a third-class king. The village over, I am with the first-class king. He's over, all the other ones, right? So there was a warrior. He went to Ghana to fight a war. I don't know the name of the war, but I'm assuming this is a war that was 70, 80, maybe 100 years ago, whatever. Various internal wars. So what happens is when you fight a war, when you go, we walk to Ghana, because from where I am, there's a bus. I can take a bus to Ghana. It'd be like probably, it wouldn't be up to, if the roads were straight, it'll probably be about a 3-4 hour drive. But with the roads not being straight, it'd be a little longer. But I can catch a bus to Ghana, right, from where I am, right? Or if I go to Lagos, you can catch a bus to Ghana. Or if I fly to Ghana, it'll take me 45 minutes. So that's like going from DC to Atlanta. So think about that difference when you think about Ghana and Nigeria, right? The distance from where I am to Ghana, right? So the warrior went to Ghana, fought a war, right? So in the battle, they captured some warriors, right? The ones in Ghana lost. I don't know if it was a Denke or if it was Denke or the Khan, but captured a slave, right? Captured a warrior. So here's the deal. In the battle, the winning side could kill the losing side right there on the battlefield, right? Or because, battles use up finite resources, which are men, right? Which are, working men, right? That's a resource. So the deal is, okay, since you lost, you have to come with me. I've captured you. I've won this battle. You're coming with me to my village, right? That's the deal, right? You can't go back to your village. Even if you got a family, you ain't going back to your village. But 9 times out of 10, most of the warriors are usually young, didn't even start their family yet, right? So usually we're talking about teenagers. We're talking about 17, 18, 19. These are the people who fight. 16, 15. These are the people who fight, right? So the enslaved warrior would be brought back to the village. And he will be incorporated into the village. He will have to work on the farm. So usually the warriors will bring back who they captured during the war. Now, the war wasn't a war to capture slaves. It was a war for other reasons. But in fact, that was the spoil of war. Because, this is not the time where people had paychecks coming from the federal government, right? Back in the day, people went to war and needed to get compensated, right? And there was no direct deposit, you know what I'm saying? And so just like Europeans would rape, murder, and pillage villages on the way to the battle so they can pay themselves, right? Here, by the time I I do what I do, I survive this war, I'm bringing you back with me. You're my spoil of this war. You're my compensation for me risking my life to fight this battle, right? So you come back, if you're a slave, you'll come back to the village that you lost against, right? And you will work for the warrior that decided not to kill you, but to capture you. It's a part of the agreement. But here's the difference. You're going to work on the farm. You won't be beaten. You won't be abused. Rule number 1, you must integrate into the family, meaning you must be accepted by the family. The family has to accept you and adopt you as their child, right? So all of a sudden, you go from fighting this person on the battlefield to being this person's family member, right? Like legitimate family member, right? So the family who you are enslaved by, and that's why it's like this word enslaved needs to be broken down into different terms, right? Because it's not like the chattel slavery. And so your new job now, as a former warrior who lost, is to work on the farm. You're going to plant cassava, you're going to plant, yams, you're going to plant peppers, you're going to plant freaking oil, palm oil. You're going to do that, right? Now, what are your restrictions as a slave? Your only restriction is you can't go back to your other village. That's the restriction. But you don't get beat. You can't get abused. You have to be fed properly, right? You can get married if you want. So let's say the person that enslaved you, the family that you now are owned by and now permanently adopted as a family member by, let's say that family had a daughter. And let's say that daughter liked you. Even though you are a slave, right, by the modern world, if that daughter likes you and you like the daughter and the family likes you, you can marry the daughter. As a slave, because you are a family member, you can marry the daughter. You can also own property and own land. You also get paid. So you are a slave, but you also get paid. You get me? So you're not really working for free, but you're obligated to work there, right? As long as the person that enslaved you is still alive. Here's the key. The person that enslaved you is still alive. Now, what I hear around here, because there are families around here who are offspring of slaves or warriors who were captured from Ghana, right, by Akiti warriors, brought to Akiti after the war, and they lived here, right, in the village, and integrated in the village, got married to either someone they fell in love with or maybe a family member of the family that has enslaved them, and they end up having a bunch of kids and thriving businesses and all kind of stuff, right? Now, when the person who enslaved you dies, you are no longer a slave. So at that point, right, the family has no rights to hold you there legally or under a social contract. So you can choose at that moment to go back to your village, or you can stay there, right? Apparently, it was quite common for the people who were enslaved due to being captured in war to stay because they were being treated very well. They were being given more opportunity in some cases than they would back in their village. They've established themselves in the village. Now, if you are enslaved, right, you are not a pariah of the community. You're not being beaten by random people. You're not being looked at or downed upon. You're just that guy over there. Now, if you are enslaved, right, and you die, right, whether you got sick or whatnot, they don't just disregard you like you're trash, like they did in the Transatlantic Slave Trade, where they wouldn't even let us put headstones on, the Africans that was enslaved, right? If you died, you got full honors as a family member in the village, right? And if you were enslaved and you didn't have any children, one of the children of the family will represent you as their daughter or their sons at your funeral, and they will dance around the village and celebrate your life, all right? Because you must be honored when you pass away. They don't play with the dead here in Africa at all. They don't play. That's how you know, side note, that's how you know them Arab Turkmen in Egypt are not actually African, and they're not Egyptians. They're not the ancient Egyptians, because they play with the dead for profit, right? Think about it. Their whole tourist industry is playing in the graves of our ancestors, right? Africans don't do that no way. Only them Arabs who have no respect for Africans, right, do that, all right? So that's what I learned. Now, my question was, I said, okay, so what if Warrior had a family in a village, right, somewhere else, in his home village, and he was captured during war? I said, can they go and see their family? The answer is no, right? But you're not restricted from talking to your family. You just can't go back to the village to see your family or anything like that. Now, what you can do, because there was no cell phones back then, ain't like you can call them, hey, I got captured, I'm over here now. Couldn't do that, right? So if you sent a messenger, if it's somehow you can get a message over there, depending on what the situation is in between you and your rivals, right, your family could very well come and live with you in the village, right, so that you can have your wife and your family there, right? And they won't be pariahs of the community, right? They would be members of the community. They would be accepted as members of the community, and they would live and thrive like everybody else, and they would not be slaves, Okay. Now, if you are enslaved and you have been captured and you have children while you're still a slave, your child is not a slave. You are enslaved because that is your contract that you have with that other warrior that captured you because they did not kill you when they could have killed you. Okay? Keep in mind, we didn't have jails back then. There were no jails. The jails are a relatively new thing, right? So, like right now in modern day, when we capture people during war, we put them in holding facilities. We have a whole place called Cuba where there's been plenty of people that we've captured during war that's been there, and they're going to be there indefinitely. All right, and I'm pretty sure they're making some license plates, all right, for free over there somewhere, right? So this was the mode of operation. If I capture you during war, you have to work for my village and work for me and be a part of my village. If you capture me during war, I have to work for you and be a part of your village. This was because human beings are resources. All right, we're resources. So, because during war you lose resources. When you have battles, you lose farmers, you lose metal workers, you lose mason workers. You lose this. So you need to replace that because 9 times out of 10, that warrior had a skill, right, that he was doing before he had to go to war, right? So that skill now has to apply to my village. So that is the form of slavery that existed in Africa pre-European slavery. It was a social contract, right? Now, were there cases of people being abusive? Of course, there's people being abusive in regular relationships. Friends abuse friends. Friends kill friends. Friends stab friends in the back. Friends do that. Husbands and wives abuse each other. So, of course, there's cases of that happening. But the overall rule is you're not supposed to hurt or abuse your captive, the one that you have enslaved, right? Because you never know when you're going to get captured, right? And you want to make sure that the tribes, the nations that participate in this war want to make sure there's some kind of civility, afterwards, right? Some type of civility afterwards, because believe it or not, even though war is chaos, right? It is an organized thing between villages, right? Sometimes even before the war, there are ways to settle the battle without fighting. Sometimes, you know what we would do? We would have a dance-off. Did you know the dance-off? Listen, the dance-off, the thing that we battle dancing, we used to battle dance before the battle. Sometimes the battle dance could solve the issue and we wouldn't have to actually dance. Peacocking, right? We would battle dance and peacock. If you can intimidate the other group by peacocking, right, and intimidate them, you could win the battle and everybody could go home, because at the end of the day, everybody wanted to go home, right? Even though this battle had to be fought for some reason or another, right? So I find it interesting. I'm like, man, y'all shouldn't even call it slavery, right? It is bondage. It's servitude. It's serfdom, basically. It's mobile serfdom. But it shouldn't be called, slavery, because it's being equated with the transatlantic slave trade. And Europeans who know that we don't know anything about the systems that we had in Africa, they know we don't know that. So they're just going to say everybody was slaves. So remember this. If we had that form of slavery, all right, think about this from a perspective of an African 500, 600 years ago, 700 years ago, right? If you come from a perspective to where after the war, you captured, someone and you enslave them, but yet you bring them in the fold and they become members of your community and they can be respected and they're not dehumanized and all that stuff. If a white person who we knew nothing about comes and say, hey, we want to participate in this form of slavery y'all got going on, right? After the battle, can we get them guys too? Because, white people, they'd be like, yeah, we'll treat them good. Because remember, at first, they lied to us. The very first Africans brought to America were lied to. They were told they were coming to the Americas to be to work. They tricked the first Africans into getting on those boats. At the very beginning, we had no idea, right? We thought we were going to go work somewhere new and come back. We got tricked, all right? So this was a slow boil. This was a boiling water, where they put boiling the frog, slowly boiling the frog. That's what happened to us. They slowly boiled us, right? So ship after ship after ship of Africans were leaving and going into the transatlantic slave trade, not knowing what they were going into, right? Sure, you don't want to leave your village and stuff, but you figured, this is the, mode of operation. We've been doing this. Okay, these white folks seem to have all these cool shit. Maybe it will be better over there. Come to find out, it was nothing. They could never imagine what was going to happen to them. And it's not like many of them were able to come back and say, hey, this is not a good deal. We don't want to do this, right? This is terrible. This is what they're doing to us, right? And the very few ones that did come back were usually the mixed children who are of the women, of the little girls who were raped by the slave master. And somehow that white slave master had some empathy for his mixed child and allowed him to be a sailor, or got him out of there and allowed him to go work for this. And very few of them were able to come back, right? And tell the story. And once the kings found out, and the big chiefs found out what was happening, they tried to stop it. But by that point, Europeans is like, look, nah, bro, we're going to keep this up. I'm going to put this gun in your face. And if you need a modern example, look at how white America is acting right now towards the Middle East. They're like, look, you're going to give me that oil for this price, or else we're going to bomb you. We're going to blow up little girls' schools. We're going to blow up your hospitals. We're going to genocide you if you don't give us what we want for this price, right? We're seeing it happening now, how they operate when they want something from you. Yes, it seemed like business is being done, but it's behind a gun. The negotiations from white people has always been behind that gun. Once they got that gun, once they stole that goddamn gunpowder, all their business dealings were being done behind the gun. So if you got a gun pointed at you, right, you got a choice. You can this magic stick that they pull and go bop, right, can end you and your entire village, or you play ball. That's what happened, right? So I found it very interesting learning about this, and I just want to bring it to you, and I want to bring it to you fresh so you can know that slavery in Africa, even I'm sure there were other forms of slavery that were worse. Like, I'm not going to say the capturing of slaves in Africa for the purpose of slavery was always bad. It's always bad when you go to a village and you capture a bunch of people for the purpose of slavery. There's no getting around that, right? But the act, the process of being a slave itself was nowhere near dehumanizing like that, like them Europeans. So don't ever let anybody try to scapegoat what they have done, right, to us by saying we were doing it too. We were not doing it too. We had our own thing that made sense for the time, right? And unfortunately, it was called slavery. But I'm pretty sure it wasn't called slavery because we weren't speaking English and it was probably called something else, right? But now we equate it with slavery. So I just wanted to bring that little info to you. I hope you learned something. Maybe it make you curious to look it up and research the different forms of slavery that existed in Africa that should not be called slavery, that should be called indentured servitude, contractual servitude, right? And I'm telling you, it's a pretty good deal. I mean, instead of killing me during this war, if I got to go work for you about 10 years, okay, no problem, Bob. That sounds like a deal, okay? But anyway, tell me what you guys think in the comment section. This is Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach something. I'm out.